Welcome. Today, let's take a moment to begin by sitting in silence and pay attention to whatever you might be thinking or feeling. Any activity in your mind or your body. Very good. I asked you to do that because the talk today requires a certain degree of clarity, which might seem strange because the talk is about a lack of clarity. The talk today is called The Awkward, Complicated Mess of Everything. And oftentimes we move through our lives in a feeling of conflict. Can you open up that door and the front door? In a sense of conflict with the way things are. We want things to be a certain way, but they're not that way. And we feel like there's something wrong with that. That's one of the most consistent themes of our lives. We want things to be this way, but they're not this way. There's some other way. And we struggle with that. We wish that they'd be different. Some of you were here a few weeks ago when we had a conversation about subjects that can be difficult to talk about around justice, race, and such. And things got a little fiery, a little complicated, a little confusing. And so often we, at that moment, have the reaction that there's something wrong, that there's a big problem. We feel bad, and so there's a problem. The goal of life is to consistently feel good. And if life isn't making us feel good, then it made a mistake. It made a wrong decision somewhere along the line. And now we don't feel good. Our tendency to think that there's something going wrong is exacerbated when the thing that's going wrong has to do with us. When it's about who I am, it's that I'm wrong. And this came up in that conversation. In that fiery conversation, there was a question about, are we saying the right thing? Are we saying the wrong thing? Does that mean that you're intelligent or ignorant? Or that I'm intelligent or ignorant? And should we do it this way or that way? And if you do it this way or that way, then what does that say about you? At those times, things feel very awkward and very messy. And so we have lots of ways of avoiding that. We rather than actually engaging in these issues, we read an article online about them. And that feels a lot cleaner, because then you read the article, and the article's right, obviously. It's written by somebody who's probably right, and now you know. Now you have read the right article, and you agree with it, probably because it was fed to you by an algorithm that knew that you would agree with it. And so now you agree with what you agree with, and it feels great. You've confirmed that you were right. And it's not messy, and it's not complicated. It's very different to engage in a way that results in vulnerability, in the possibility of making a mistake, of being wrong, of being afraid. Then things get very complicated. And one of the things that we hear a lot when people come, we've recently, just so you know, a number of people have come to visit us at the Monastic Academy out in the middle of nowhere. And when they come there, they see that we have a little bit of isolation from the mainstream culture, and therefore the ability to make our own culture. And in that culture, feeling bad is okay. It's okay if you feel bad. You can sit there at breakfast and cry, as happened this morning, and everyone cares and nobody cares. Everybody cares about how you're feeling and doesn't do anything about it. Because it's fine. You feel bad right now. Great. Everybody's willing to enter the mess together. And if you're willing to enter the mess together, then the mess becomes a celebration. The mess becomes a statement of empowerment. The mess becomes a wave that you get to surf, or, the snow, you get to ski or something. And nice spring skiing on the mountain, right? So, by entering the mess, we resolve it. If we enter it willingly. I believe it was Master Tozan, Master Dongshan, in Tang Dynasty, China, a Zen master, who was teaching at a monastery, and back then they didn't have the modern conveniences that we have. They didn't have nice radiant floor heating. They didn't have air conditioning in the summer, and so sometimes it was very hot. It's sort of actually like this room, actually. I'm just talking about this. This room is so cold in the winter and so hot in the summer. And the monastery was a little bit like that, except without these heaters. And so there was a monk who went to the master and asked him, I don't know if I can handle this weather. I don't know if I can handle the heat in the summer and the cold in the winter. It's too hard for me. Where can I go to get away from this heat and this cold? Where can I go to escape it? And it's Zen. So the master said, I'll give you a number of interpretations. He said, right in the middle of the cold, right in the middle of the heat. And the way that's usually interpreted is, when it's cold, freeze to death. When it's hot, burn to death. Enter it so totally that you're not in conflict with it, and that in itself already resolves it. This is the same thing with emotions. We have difficult emotions, they come up, we feel afraid, we feel frustrated, we feel vulnerable, we feel humiliated. And how do we escape from the suffering that causes? Because we want to escape from it, naturally. Of course we want to escape from it. It's natural. How do we do it? Well, one way to do it is to fight against it, to be in conflict with it. So if we say something and then somebody says you shouldn't say that, we can argue with them. We can hold more tightly onto our own views. That's one way to try to resolve it. And that, as far as I can tell, is our current, and perhaps it's common throughout history, but in any case, it's the current circumstance of this country right now. Right now we have a very divided culture. The culture is quite divided, and the two sides are very much in conflict with each other. And neither side seems able to see that the resistance to the other side is what creates it. Fighting against the other side is what creates that side. For me, I less and less, as time goes on, identify with either of these two sides of the political situation right now, which means that everyone disagrees with me. And everyone finds me offensive if we get into these conversations. And from the outside, it seems very clear that the argument has become the point. The argument is actually the goal now. But that argument requires two sides. And so by engaging in the argument, we produce a situation in which there must be contradictory, fixed views, and that's what allows the conflict. What would happen, though, if someone disagreed with us and we opened up to that rather than fighting against it? And pay attention to your emotional reaction to that. It's worth paying close attention to how we might feel if we opened up, became vulnerable under those circumstances. Because that's the other direction to go in. The other direction to go in is that if we're feeling bad, feel bad. If someone next to you is feeling bad, great. They feel bad right now. That's okay. It's not contrary to the purpose of human life that people feel bad sometimes. And when we look at it that way, especially when it has to do with our identity, then real transformation becomes possible. The basic framework that I look at this in is that if we don't resist, then things are simultaneously arbitrary and beautiful. Hold on just a second. It's okay. We're good.
We're good?
Yeah, we're good. It's okay. You can sit down. There's some chemical in the room, and I fixed something with glue or something like that.
Oh.
I don't know what it is. Yeah, something like that. Oh, that's what's airing. So on the at the deep level, things are arbitrary and simultaneously miraculous. Things are unknown, unpredictable, uncontrolled, and wondrous. If there's any resistance to that, then suddenly that lack of control becomes a terrifying, meaningless void in which everything good is torn apart in every moment. There's no safety, there's no security, there's no love, and there's no meaning. At that moment, there are two possibilities. One is increase the resistance, and the other is drop that resistance. If we increase the resistance, then we can, with great effort, wall ourselves off and create a little bubble of a dream that we attempt to live in. And we have to maintain constant resistance in every direction in order to maintain this bubble. And what's in that bubble? Well, the way we think the world is in that bubble, and the way we think we are is in that bubble. Those are the two things that we try to maintain against all evidence. So we're always needing to look out for reality, because reality isn't what we think it is, and therefore it's the enemy to my life. Reality is the problem. And this is then the mess, the awkward, complicated mess of everything. Because everything is a problem. Every direction we look, we see something other than what we expected, other than what we wanted. And therefore, we have to be sure that right within the process of looking, we're already resisting what is perceived. Already within the act of feeling, we have to be resisting what is felt. And so we end up in a life that has a very simple motto. And those of you who've done a lot of meditation are familiar with this motto. And the motto is no. That is life. That's it. Life becomes a constant no. And everything that comes, first thing we do is say no to it. And then we manipulate it into position in our little world as to the maximum extent possible. And then we begrudgingly say yes because we're out of strength. And then the next thing comes. Now what happens as we train is that we start to let go of some of that resistance. Some of the resistance to the way things are. And when we do that, the bubble starts to break down. The bubble starts to fall apart a little bit because we're no longer so vigilant about maintaining it, or to be more practically accurate about the way things actually happen. We're put into a position with the practice that uses up enough of our attention and strength that we just fail to be vigilant. We're trying, but we can't quite pull it off. And so the flaws, the errors in our worldview start to become apparent. And so naturally, our reaction to that is that there's something wrong with the practice. There's something wrong here. The practice is wrong because I felt better just 5 minutes ago. And now I'm practicing all this, and suddenly I'm all distracted, and I'm noticing all kinds of material in my body that doesn't feel good. And we enter either utter befuddled, disoriented suffering, or we just enter what we call the creepy, crawly, icky, sticky, it doesn't really hurt, but I can't stand it feeling. It's just, no. And we have the sense that this is bad, that there's something wrong. And so we go to our meditation teacher and complain. And we're clear that there's something really wrong here. I should at least change techniques and maybe change my entire life to avoid this, because this is not working. We had a nice little bubble that was constantly defended against all comers. And it started to break down. And there's a long period there for most of us. For most of us, it's a long period. Most means virtually everyone. I guess I should come back to that. Try to remember to come back to that. So virtually everyone has a long period of this awkward intermediate zone of awfulness. Until it completely drops off. And then without resistance, we accept the unknown, unpredictable, uncreated, perfect, unmistaken nature of everything, which is another way of saying the awkward, complicated mess of everything. It's just that's how it's experienced when we don't fight against it. It's very hard for us to believe this, because the deeper we go into the awkward zone, the more it seems like things are really broken, things are really flawed, and there really isn't any hope. And we base our lives on hope. We have a lot of hope. We're such an interesting species, and within the species we're such an interesting culture. Because we as human beings in general, but we as this particular culture in particular, consistently predict that things will get better than they actually get. It's a very consistent theme for us. We really believe that in 10 years I'll be a lot better off than I am, and really consistently we're not after 10 years. It's very interesting, and to see that unpredictable nature doesn't mean the fact that things aren't getting better doesn't necessarily mean that things are bad in 10 years. It maybe meant that things were already fine 10 years ago when we made that prediction, and now they're still fine. That shift is a major shift for us. And what happens when we make the shift is that we start to have a totally different connection to messes, to the mess of everything. We begin to celebrate it. That begins to be the thing that gives us hope, versus that mess changing into some other thing. So what does that mean? Well, it means that for me, given my position, my experiences, and my goals, when I see people entering the mess, if I'm teaching someone and things are starting to get messy, and they're really falling apart, and they've gone from competent to incompetent, and capable to incapable, and intelligent to ignorant, and they're starting to feel like nothing's ever going to work, that to me is very exciting. And it indicates here's a person who's on their way. This is happening finally. Why? Because when we're in that position, things might not feel better. I understand that. But things are more real. And the way you know that they're more real is that you're trying to escape and failing. You don't want it to be that way. You really don't. You want to be able to concentrate, and you can't. You want to be compassionate, and you aren't. You want to be capable, but that doesn't seem possible. You're doing everything you can to escape from the way things are, and you're failing. That means that, in all likelihood, you're seeing things more really than you were before. Because before, you were making it so that you could see things a certain way and you were succeeding, but in this case, you're trying to see things in a certain way and you're failing. That's very exciting. When you're trying to see things in a certain way, but you're seeing that the evidence doesn't support it, that's an extremely exciting moment. And is a moment that, to my knowledge, was only discovered once in human history. I don't know of any other occasion. Maybe there are others that I don't know about. But I only know of one discovery of that, and that was, in fact, in early Buddhism. The discovery that there's a moment when you realize that your theory isn't supported by the evidence. Your worldview isn't supported by what you're observing. And at that moment, you don't know how to look at things. And that is a moment to celebrate and even cultivate. Nowadays, of course, we have science that at least attempts to do that a lot. Science makes its name on the idea that it really discovered ignorance. That was the most important discovery of the Renaissance, the discovery of ignorance. And compares it to a very small amount of history in a very small amount of the world prior to that, in which doctrine was held on to very tightly. But that sense was already present in Greek philosophy, held and carried by the Abrahamic traditions, in particular certain forms of Christianity, and which had been impacted by that Greek philosophy. And that Greek philosophy was developed by somebody named Pyrrho, and Pyrrho had studied in India at least one, but probably a few Buddhist monasteries. And it's common in this. There's lots of historical examples of times when something extremely important was discovered once and then spread. We are very fortunate right now to be in a position to be able to at least have the philosophical capacity to celebrate ignorance, to celebrate this mess, to celebrate the place in which we don't know what's happening, we don't know why it's happening, we don't even know what should happen. The only thing we know is we can't escape from this confusion. If that's in the case of science, where we're talking about something that doesn't really impact our sense of identity, it's just a theory about what atoms do or something, how does light behave, well, that's pretty good. That's fine. But if it's the case of self, if it's the case of ourselves, of who we actually are, that is the thing that we're unsure about. That's the thing we're unclear about. That's the thing we're trying to be clear about, but we're failing to be clear about. That is a moment of great courage. And that's a moment that we try to avoid at all costs. And how do we avoid it? We avoid it by dulling our minds. That's how we do it. We avoid it by dulling our senses, dulling our intellect, and continually reiterating the same views inside of our heads to be sure that we don't lose our inertia in the direction of ignorance. That's the thing that people typically face when they sit down to meditate. People sit down to meditate and typically get tired, sleepy. There's a sense of, maybe I'm going to fall asleep now. Why? Well, because this meditation thing is very dangerous. If you actually use it and pay attention, it will revolutionize your sense of self. But that means that who you think you are is in great danger. The person who you think you are is no longer safe. And there's an easy way to avoid that problem, which is close your eyes and go to sleep. That way the time will pass, but nothing will come of it. And one of the most important skills we gain is how to keep paying attention in the mess. There are two directions that we typically go in. One is the direction of sloth and torpor, exhaustion, sleepiness, where we say, oh, I'm just tired of this. And the other is this anxious grasping on to a certain way of looking at things. And so we see that in this meditation, it's very common that we just nod off. In, as I said, the political arena, it's very common that we hold on. And we feel excited by that. It feels so energizing and exciting to be in this fight with the people who are wrong. Versus the other, in which it just feels so satisfying to drop off and disappear and let the patterns continue. As we meditate, we get to a point when we can maintain not knowing. We can maintain not understanding. And we can actually cultivate the sense that who I am is not being defended right now. Who I am, the person who I think I am, doesn't have to be defended right now. That is a moment, as we know, who were here in that fiery conversation, with a lot of insecurity, a lot of confused, inappropriate laughter in the room. That moment of a real mess. Because it's so uncomfortable to talk about these issues and nobody knows how to solve them. We have huge issues in our society and no one knows what to do about it. And that's very scary. We feel like someone should know, and so this group knows, and if you're against this group, then you're wrong. And so you should be eliminated. That group, however, should be held up, protected. That sense of tightness is the only kind of exhilaration most of us experience in that realm. That's the only kind of excitement and joy that we get. There isn't the deeper joy of acknowledging that no one knows how to do this well, that this is a mess. There's a deeper gratification in accepting that allows us to break through that tightness and also that drowsiness. If we can do that, then we can abide in this awkward, complicated mess of everything. We can just stay there. We just stay in it. We stay right there, right in it, without the sense that I know how I'm going to turn this into the right answer. I've got it. This is what it is. And now I'm going to make this be that. That is dropped away, and there's no knowledge of how to make things right. There's no understanding of that. No, there's good news if we can do that. There's very, very good news if we can get to that point. The first good news is you will learn much more quickly under those circumstances, and that will make you a much more competent leader. Those are the circumstances under which we learn. And because we learn, we will be more competent. That's very exciting. Very, very exciting. The other good news is that is the experience of humility. We are humbled. The longer we stay in that not knowing, the more deeply we're humbled. And that means that when we become leaders, we will be better, more compassionate, more loving leaders. Less power hungry and more powerful. It's good news in both directions if we can stay in not knowing, in not understanding, and not let that turn into dull ignorance, and not let it turn into a constant attempt to hold on to something in all this that's real and true. If we can do that, then the best news of all, the final good news, is that it's possible to break out of that middle awkward stage. So we've already broken out of our little bubble, and now everything is a mess, and it's awkward, and it's complicated, and it's not what we want. And every direction we turn, we see what we don't want to see. because we've stopped saying no so completely that we don't see what we want to see, but we haven't stopped saying no enough to receive it as it is. But if we stop saying no totally, if that ends completely, then there is, without any change whatsoever, there is beauty. And it's important to be clear that there is no change whatsoever. There's no change at all, of any kind, at that moment. None. None. No change at the moment of going from pure hell to a bliss beyond what heaven offers. There is absolutely no change whatsoever of any kind. This is very important to see. And don't think, no, but your consciousness changes. It doesn't. Nothing changes at that moment. At all. Inside, outside. Past, present, future. Here, there, me, you. Nothing changes.
It's both.
Good try. With that comes a transcendent experience of liberation, and a completely new kind of leadership is possible beyond that. And that is a change. That's a change that's, well, let's face it, the actual purpose of life. That is what the purpose of life actually is. So, this is our opportunity to directly explore that. Take a moment to extend your posture up into the sky and root your base, your tailbone, your legs, your feet down into the earth. And attend to your body, what you're feeling. What you're feeling both physically and emotionally. And just keep track of that. Just keep track of what you're feeling right now. The important part of this is that you're striving to attend to what you're feeling right now. That's what's important. That may mean that you are attending to what you're feeling right now. If so, very good. Continue to attend to what you're feeling right now. It may mean that you're failing to attend to what you're feeling right now because you're getting distracted. If so, then the fact that you're striving makes that into a problem. It's a problem. Your goal is to attend to your body sensations, and you're not. So you're failing. And that is a mess. Good. Experience that mess. It's a disaster. It's hopeless. You're just being asked to do something so simple. Attend to body sensations. Anyone should be able to do that, but unfortunately you can't. And deeply experience that. The failure. The awkwardness. The humility. The not knowing how to do this. So either you will, in fact, attend to body sensations, in that case, attend to them, or you will not. In that case, experience what it's like to be unable to do something so simple. Either way, strive. Make an effort. If you'd like, you can at any time readjust your posture. But continue the same technique. Strive to attend to body sensations. If you are able to feel what you're feeling right now, feel it. Feel it completely. Strive to feel it more and more accurately and fully. If you can't do that, then you're failing. You're failing at this task. And experience that just as it is. Allow yourself to experience that just as it is. How is it to strive and fail at this task? What is that experience? The ability to remain focused on a certain object, and even more, remain focused on a certain goal. That ability, remaining focused, and the ability to not know. The ability to be confused. The ability to not be certain that my way of looking at things is right. These two abilities, these two skills may be the most important skills in terms of happiness and in terms of the ability to make change in our lives. That's what we're developing right now. Now, change the technique just a bit. We'll adjust the technique just a bit. Now, what you experience, whatever it is, might be a body sensation, or it might be the inability to attend to body sensations. Either way, first and foremost, the moment that you realize what you're experiencing, practice your first reaction being saying yes. Say yes to it. Perhaps you're feeling relaxed in your body. You attend to your body and you feel relaxation. Right away, say yes. Yes. Say yes to that relaxation in your mind as loudly and as quickly as you can. If you're feeling pain, discomfort, the moment you realize that that's what you're feeling, say yes to it. Say yes as loudly and as quickly as you can. And if you're having the experience of being unable to attend to body sensations because of distraction, right away, say yes to that as loudly and as quickly as you can. Know that in general, we will fall into one of two ruts. One is grasping on to a certain view, to a certain sensation, to a certain way that we think things are. In particular, a certain view about ourselves. I'm doing it, I'm not doing it. I should do it, I don't think I can do it. Grasping onto that will be a common issue. And the other is drowsiness. That's the other way that we say no. We say, no, I will not experience this. Either by saying, this is wrong, I know the real way it is, or by saying nothing, because we just doze off. Now, of course, I can see in the room there are many people a little bit drowsy. But know that from my perspective, that's something to celebrate, because you're facing your own tendency to avoid this experience. Good job. Face it. And practice, rather than dozing off, saying yes. And how? By saying yes to the experience of dozing off. Say yes to the experience of being unable to attend to body sensation. And if you are attending, say yes to this moment of body sensation. And with that, overcome the tendency to grasp on to the idea, to the view of what's happening right now. This moment, this experience, say yes. In a moment, I will ring the bell and we'll have a few minutes to move around. If you'd like, you can get some water or go outside or stretch. And then we'll start the next session in about 3 minutes. Have a short time to move around, but continue to do this technique while you move around. Continue to maintain this technique. Attend to body sensations. If you can do that, say yes to whatever body sensation arises. If you find you can't do that, you're incapable, incompetent, failing at this simple task, say yes to that. And continue with that technique. We continue with the technique. And now, with that as the basis, we can do a certain exploration, a fascinating exploration. So much of our striving is based on conflict, that we can forget how to strive in a way that's not based on conflict. Right now, we're doing two things that may seem contradictory. We're saying yes to the way things are, and we're striving to make things better. May seem contradictory. We're saying yes to the experience we're having, and we're simultaneously striving to pay more attention, to attend more clearly and fully to what we're feeling right now. And yet, somehow, those can be done together. Explore how it is that by saying yes, you are enabled to strive more fully. So once again, strive to attend to body sensations right now. If you do feel what you're feeling right now, feel that completely. Say yes to it as quickly and loudly as you can. If you cannot do that, if you strive but fail. You get distracted by this or that. Then that experience of not knowing how to do this. Say yes to that experience. Knowing that the two most common ways that we say no to this experience are by grabbing on to what we think is happening, having a certain story about it that we deeply believe, like, I'm concentrating right now. Right now I'm paying attention to what I'm feeling in my body, without noticing that we're not. On the contrary, we're paying attention to what we're thinking in our heads. What we're thinking in our heads is I'm paying attention to my body. That grasping onto a certain view, or dozing off, going unconscious. That's how we say no in general. Say yes to the experience of being unable to attend to body sensations right now, if in fact you are unable to do that. And even as you do that, strive more completely to attend to what you're feeling right now. Once again, the instructions are: 1. Strive to attend to what you're feeling in your body right now. Step 2, say yes, either to the sensations that you're feeling now, if in fact you brought your attention to that, or the experience of not knowing how to bring your attention to that right now. And 3, strive further. This is a kind of striving that's not based on conflict. Very good. So this is a time for conversation, reports, discussion, arguments, critique, praise. Community. In a word, community. That's what it's time for. Yes.
I find this very important. The last sentence of your talk you declared, and that is the absolute purpose of life.
Big statement.
Now, I was paying attention prior to that, certainly, but I can't risk having heard anything wrong because I have been seeking the purpose of life for eons. I need to hear a synopsis of what the purpose of life is. In case I miss something, I cannot wait for the sound download.
Yeah. So, I should let you know that I don't want this to sound wrong, so don't make any assumptions about what I'm about to say, just hear it. I don't pay very close attention to my talks. Sometimes I need to wait for the SoundCloud version of my own talks. However, I think, and that's significant, because talks are for the purpose of realization. They're not for the purpose of doctrine. The doctrine in a talk, you give a talk, then you're stating certain beliefs, and yet those beliefs should be pointing at something that isn't a belief. Or else it's just doctrine. Nothing wrong with doctrine, but it's just doctrine. Doctrine is a good tool. If you want a house, you may need a hammer, but just because you have a hammer doesn't mean you have a house.
Yep.
So it's good to have the tool of doctrine, but you don't want to feel satisfied with that alone. But I think I said something like the compassionate leadership that bursts forth as a result of transcendence of identity is the ultimate purpose of life. Does that answer your question?
I seem to recall you were bringing several elements of what you had been speaking of prior and kind of wrapped it up with that declaration.
Yes.
And I do remember, what I do remember is essentially what you just stated. And is there any more reason to go further in review of that? I mean, I heard what you had said earlier.
In order to, so I talked about a path, and the path goes from living in a bubble that apparently is harmonious, but is based on omnidirectional conflict. That's the right word. To this awkward mess in which there's still omnidirectional conflict, but the bubble isn't working so well, and we're stuck in it, and so every direction you look is the wrong direction. It's not helping. Yes, you're, as they say in the Buddhist tradition, you're uncomfortable whether you're walking, standing, sitting, or lying down. Everything you do is still wrong, and you're wrong, or maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, it's wrong, we're wrong, I don't know, but this doesn't feel right. And that is typically quite a long process. And it's very difficult to know if we're going in the right direction. in that process. And at the end of that, there comes the experience of things are not wrong. That the experience of things being wrong is caused by conflict that I am bringing in, that I am maintaining. The act of conflict results in a miraculous harmony being experienced as a conflicted mess. If we can drop that conflict, then we leave the meaningless void of everything good being torn apart to something else. It's hard to describe. And with that experience comes the possibility of utterly transcending the sense of self, the conflict that most of our lives are based on. But even that isn't the end. Because beyond that, it's possible to be, as they say, reborn, to burst forth from that as a compassionate servant, leader, whatever word you want for it. You could say leader, you could say slave. At that point, it doesn't really matter. It's referring to the same thing. That then is what this is all about. Okay?
Got it. It confirms my listening comprehension for the first half hour was correct, and I'm actually most of the way there.
Yeah.
I just need that moment.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Exactly. I'm just waiting to see if anyone who isn't a resident has anything to say, because residents may have the opportunity to ask at another time. No guarantee, of course, but I'll take the risk if anyone else had a comment. Yeah?
In the early part of your talk, you reminded Steve, you said to Stephen to remind you about talking more about the very long period
Right.
process of purgatory that we all go through.
Right.
And I don't think that...
Did you remind me to do that?
No, can I remind you now?
I was trying to.
Oh, you're just trying to.
When did you try to do that? Now?
That's when you had us.
Oh, well, the talk is over now.
Sorry, Steve.
It's over. They say, in Chinese, they have the expression, you drew the bow after the thief had left. The thief took everything, and then you try to do something about it.
In Vermont, we say the horse is out of the barn.
The horse is out of the barn. There we are. Yes, the horse is out of the barn.
But you can't possibly outdo that is the purpose of life. So just as well answer that now.
Right. Yeah, I can say something about that if you'd like. I don't remember at all what I was going to say then. But I can tell you what I have now, if you'd like. New talk. Are you interested?
Yes, sure. I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, so a lot of us need to go through this long, awkward process. And most of us, in fact, need to go through that. And that's good. People who try not to go through that long, awkward process just go through it for a longer period of time. Even people who have spontaneous awakenings, because there are such people who suddenly have a spiritual awakening without training, at least that we know about, still need to go through, in general, a long, awkward process of doing the work that's needed in order to bring a life into harmony with that. Now, it's very important to know that you can go through that side of it. So there are two sides, let's say. There's the side that happens in time. And most of us are totally preoccupied with what happens in time. And therefore, this is the only part that we pay attention to. There's a portion that happens in time. And that's the part where you bring your life into accordance with whatever you call it, Dharma, God, nature. You bring your life into accord with that. And then there's the part that happens outside of time. So, we have words for that also, yes? Enlightenment, awakening, finding God, things like that. That is a part of life, a possibility in life, that most of us don't consider at all, and those of us who consider it often don't prioritize it over other things. And then there's a very few people in the world. This room is a good example of many of those people. Few people in the world think it's really important and worth sacrificing for. So that's good. But what is often misunderstood is that work, the work to bring your life into accord with the Dharma, can be done before or after that experience. It can be. That's actually quite exciting. What does that mean? Well, first of all, you already have a pretty good sense of what that is, right? We do. We have a sense of it. Should you abuse people? Would that be in accord with the Dharma? Should you destroy life? Should we wipe out life on this planet, causing countless species to go extinct? We already have a sense of that. We already have a sense that if we could fulfill the Dharma, if we could live in accordance with that, we wouldn't do that. Right? And so the work to not do that is doing that work. Is moving us towards the true integration of what is in time and what is not. It's happening. Good. Once you've had that experience, it turns out to be, it depends on the depth of the experience. For most of us, the depth of the experience makes two things easier. Two things both become easier once you've had an experience of awakening, unless it's very profound. But for most of us, both things become easier. Bringing your life into accord with the Dharma. Yes? That's something that becomes much easier once you've had an awakening. Much, much easier. Everything changes. You're able to cut through things in a moment that you couldn't cut through in years previously. Yes? You take years working on something, you have an experience like that, you can cut through it in less than a second. You can change your behavior in less than a second versus a decade or longer. That's very exciting. It makes a big difference. This is important to really emphasize because it's one of the reasons to strive for that experience. However, There's another thing that also becomes easier, which is to not bring your life into accord with the Dharma, because you have a source of happiness that you can easily warp and manipulate so that you can protect yourself from the need to change your behavior. It's very sad. Both become easier. Now, it's good to know that the way that the liberation that makes it easier to bring your life into accord is called right liberation, correct liberation, good liberation, true liberation, complete liberation. The liberation that that makes it easier to not do that is also called something. It's called wrong liberation, incomplete liberation, false liberation, incomplete, problematic liberation. And these are technical terms in the Buddhist tradition. And many people don't know that. Many people think, well, liberation is just liberation. But actually, when we have an experience like that, it's not at all uncommon, as I say, unless it's very profound, that these two kinds of liberation get mixed, tangled. And we can't tell them apart because the liberation isn't complete. And so how will that play out is unknown. If we have already gone through that struggle, okay? If we've already gone through that struggle, then that will vastly increase the likelihood that our experience will be that of right liberation. If we've already struggled with how to bring our life into accord, we've tried and failed and tried again and made some successes and then backslid and then moved forward again and realized we need support from others, and then others don't actually support us, so we realize we need support from others. And we do that, and it's confusing and it's humiliating. That process is the process that makes it likely that when we experience liberation, it will be right liberation. And if we have that experience of liberation, it makes it much easier to go through that process. Yes? And so our challenge in going through the process is to somehow create that feedback loop between the struggles of trying to bring our life into accord with the Dharma, and then realizing directly the Dharma, and then bringing our life into accord with that in a useful way, in a productive way, and through that, making it more likely that we will have a deeper experience, and with that deeper experience, changing our life even more effectively. Yes? And that process is the way that we move through this struggle in the most efficient way. Not by trying to avoid this half of it.
Did Peace Pilgrim have a chart about that in the book?
Does she have a chart about that in the book?
There's a timeline of the years from...
Yeah, if you remember, she has that zigzag section.
Right.
So actually, of course, it's a chart. You know, come on. It contains, the whole point of a chart, the useful thing about a chart is it contains so little information. Does that make sense? We think a chart contains a lot of information because we perceive a lot of information in a chart. But the reason you perceive so much information in a chart is that the rest of the information has been excluded. That's why it seems like you're seeing a lot of information, because most of the information is not there. So the amount of information that is there matches the intelligence of the human mind. Yes? So it matches, and so you think you're seeing a lot. But actually, there's a lot more than... Her life can't really be put into a chart. It's true. You can make a chart of her life. That doesn't mean the chart is wrong. But the chart is so incomplete as to be potentially misleading. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a section of the chart where she's just sort of working her way towards her first experience of surrender. That also had these little zigzags. But there wasn't a fundamental shift. And if we have an experience of liberation, there is a fundamental shift. It's just fundamental, and you can't go back. She calls it a point of no return. It's just how it is. And you realize that this is how it is. You might not live that way. There might be so much inertia from your past self-centered activities that you don't live that way. And you might even, sadly, especially if you haven't gone through the ethical struggles that she'd already gone through. But that's what she was doing. If you read the book, she was struggling for years. It's why it's so hard for me that so many of us try to avoid that terrible struggle, failing for years. She went through a terrible struggle for years. How am I going to do this? Should I have this job? Should I have that job? Should I live in this place? Should I live in that place? Should I be married? Should I not be married? What should I do? I don't know how I should do this. I have no idea how I should do this, but I'm still trying to do it, but I don't like what's happening. That happened for years from when she was a child. And that struggle, of course we look at the book and we say, wow, here's a spiritual genius. Couldn't be me, right? Total spiritual genius. But she just struggled. She just was deeply aware of her inability to live in a spiritual way for a long time. So if we want to do that, we do that. We're deeply aware of how we're not doing this right. And again, today, I'm still not. But I'm still not. And it hurts. And so you get creative. And you try this and you try that. And it still doesn't work. And so you learn from others. And you try this and try that. And it still doesn't work. And then try this and try that and try this and try that. That is of the utmost importance to go through. Now, you might go through that, and then as a result of that, do what she did. And one night, as you're walking outside all night, totally surrender. And with that, there will be a liberation, and that liberation will integrate into that struggle. Yes? The timeless experience will meet the storehouse of your morality, which is the struggle. And with that meeting, they will begin the integration process. Then you see the zigzag note. At that point, it isn't, okay, done. She then could see directly the difference, you see. You understand? Before that, she couldn't tell. Is this in accord? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. How could I know? I'll trust this book. Well, that didn't work too well, but it worked a little. How about this person? I don't know. How about my intuition? Kind of. That went on until that moment, which was a point of no return, when she knew this is the right way. I just can't live it. And occasionally she'd meet it. Wait, is this it? No. Is this it? Yes, but it's gone. Where did it go? I don't know. I'm now selfish again. I don't know why. But it is selfish. This is not in accord. And then again, this is in accord. Oh no, it's now not. It only lasted for 2 seconds. It only lasted for 2 hours. Right? What's going on? I don't know. But that then is the struggle of this difficult integration, when we're gradually seeing something so subtle that we can't mentally understand it. The purification is happening under those circumstances. And then there comes a point when that is totally clarified. There's a complete clarification, finally. Everything that needed to be done has been done. And at that point, there's just no more struggle. The struggle has been exhausted. And as she puts it, there's no need to go back down into the valley. But note, even then, it doesn't end. She just doesn't, if you look at the chart, it just goes up consistently. It doesn't go up through these zigzags anymore. It's just a constant, every next experience is the next realization. Every single one. And then, as she puts it, life changes in a way that you just cannot believe before. Because at that point, every problem becomes a test. Everything you get to test is this true? If it were true, then whatever problem were to come up would be no problem. So you just start beating on, you stop protecting your spirituality and your spiritual experiences, and you start attempting to destroy them. You want the worst things to come, the most challenging things to come. And the harder it gets, the more you feel yourself coming to life. And that's why they call it a lotus blossoming in the flames. Because whatever it is, and it's just, you just feel more alive. Because it's true. The worse it gets, the more it's proven that this is the real thing. And so then you can do what she did. Yes? And she's just interested. That's what she says in her book. She's just excited. What are the next tests? If I'm freezing to death, will this joy go away? Nope. It didn't. If somebody's beating me up, yes, will this compassion go away? No. Not at all, actually. Not in the slightest. And everything becomes proof. And you're looking for the disproof, finally. That's what's more exciting. And you don't find it. You just look and look. And every next time you glimpse it, by the time you've seen it, it's gone.